For this edition of the EMAG, you join me here at Hayfield Lakes in Doncaster, and this is where the 2019 Fishermania final is. Luckily I managed to qualify, as many of you might have known, at Partridge Lakes, and you join me here today at the start of a practice week. I'm joined by my good friend Callum Dix, who's going to be my bank runner on the day, and hopefully between us we're going to come up and devise a little bit of a winning plan. That's the plan anyway. A little bit about Hayfield Lakes. It's a little bit like Gold Valley in a way. The main stocking is big carp, from 4 right up to double figures and even bigger. There is quite a few Carasio in this lake which can play a part, but past experiences and looking at the venue, and Callum's fished here a bit recently, the carp are the ones that are going to win you the match. Like I said before, when we've been out practicing for various different events, practicing is about learning how to fill your net, not sitting there filling your net. If you see anything, you notice anything, you can always get up and go for a little walk. Maybe you might just notice that thing that come the day could make that little bit of difference. As I've said, I'm in a very fortunate position. Got Callum here all week with me practicing. 2 heads are better than 1 and all that. And fishing is definitely no different. Obviously when you're practicing for an event like Fishermania, there's a few things that you've got to look at. If you look around the lake today, there's only a handful of people here. Come the day of the event, it's going to be 2 pegs, miss 1, 2 pegs, miss 1. There's a junior match on one end and the ladies match on the other. So as you can see, there's not going to be a lot of room for edge fishing, or maybe even top 5. And that's something that you have to look at in depth when you're looking to practice for an event. Try and eliminate the methods that probably aren't going to play a part. You know, if I do get an edge peg and it looks good, the wind's blowing in, am I going to cover it? Yes, for sure. But it's a type of fishing that I've done a lot of. If I was a betting man, I'd have to say that this final is either going to be won on a method feeder, a bomb waggler, or pole shallow. And they're the methods that I'm going to look at really concentrating on over the next few days. I'm not going to do it all today. For today's session, I've set up a long pole shallow at 3 different depths, but we'll go into that again in more detail when we're on the box. And I've also set up a bomb and 2 waggler rods. Reason I've set up 2 waggler rods, had a little bit of a fish yesterday afternoon. I did miss a few bites and foul hooked a few fish, so I've put up a slightly lighter waggler on a longer rod, which is a tactic that I know works well here and that Callum's seen and he's done well on here in recent weeks. So like I say, that's a little bit of the thinking behind my practice week. Because it's a winner-take-all event, yeah, they do pay second, but basically you're here to try and win the event. It's not what I've been brought up to do. I've been brought up more or less as a team angler, trying to get every point and fishing in a conservative way so that you don't do bad. However, these finals are a completely different animal. You're fishing to win the match. You've got to pick a method where, if it works, you can win the match. I'm not going to sit there and try and look pretty, try and just beat the people either side of me in a bad area. It's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to walk away either winner or second, and that's what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to really fine-tune the methods that, given the peg, are going to win you the match. And like I say, today I've picked peg 22 on the far bank opposite the wooded bank, which is a brilliant area. We've got the wind off our back. It's a bit of a northwesterly today. It's meant to swing round a bit more northerly as the week goes on, but that's something that we can look at again as the week goes on. Obviously I've set out the wind. It's definitely an aim of mine in this week to fish in the wind, because I think when you're out the wind, long pole shallow, waggler are definitely going to play a part. It's going to get a bit cooler next week. You notice that I always put, you know, a lot of emphasis on the weather. I'm always looking at the weather, what the wind's going to do, what the temperature's going to do, the strength of the wind, direction of the wind, because obviously that determines, you know, really the temperature. So I'm always looking. Also, the first thing I do when I get to the lake, I've got a compass in the van, get that out, find out where north, south, east and west is. If you're here early enough in the morning, you can always use the sun as a good marker. But yesterday I got here a little bit later, and having looked at the weather, it's very important that you go away, and when you're sat in your hotel room or you're sat at home, you can look at your phone, oh, it's blowing a northerly tomorrow, and you know exactly in your mind's eye where that wind's coming from. If you draw your peg or you want to go practicing, you know without even being at the lake what direction that wind's in, and it's vitally important. But going back to the fishing, I expect waggler bomb and long pole really to dominate. You'll see this lake where the final is. There is an island and there's quite a few feeder chucks towards the island. Some of them are quite a long way, probably around about 65-70 metres, and some of them are very short, with a peg to my left, or a couple to my left, peg 20 being probably the closest. So method feeder will definitely play a part. It's not something I'm going to do today. Callum's going to have a little go on the method feeder, so we should see if there's any fish to be caught on that. But really, I'm looking to have a whole day during the week fishing the method feeder, just fine-tuning my gear, fine-tuning the mixes, hooks, hook baits. But today, as it's my first full day's practice, I really want to concentrate on the pole shallow and the waggler. Obviously, I've drawn up a little list in my mind what I want to concentrate on, and it's not just the methods, it's the technique as well. And what I'm really looking to do today is to get adept at fishing the long pole whilst feeding my waggler and bomb line. I think it's vitally important that you're more than adequate with a catapult when you're fishing a 16-metre pole, but fishing it well and still feeding that waggler line. That's something that I want to look at today. Depths is another thing, but as I've already said, I'm in a fortunate position. Callum's been fishing here. He framed in the UK, he won his section here the other day, and the depths thing, 3 and 4 foot, you can catch on the pole. This lake behind us is a little bit unique in a way, in the fact that it's very deep, up to 15 foot in areas. So when you're catching shallow in this depth of water, it doesn't always necessarily mean a foot deep or a foot and a half deep. Sometimes it's what they call in the trade fishing deep shallow, so 3 and 4 foot. And I know 3.5 foot is a depth that Callum's got in his mind where these carp definitely feed. As I've already touched on a little bit, we are here on our own virtually. There's an odd person rolling up now, but not too many. And what we're looking to do today is hopefully, you know, catch a few fish, but bearing in mind that come the day it's going to be a lot harder. So like I say, I think it's time to get down to the peg, have a little look at the gear and the bait that I've got for today's session, and then start fishing and try and put a few fish together. So you can see I'm already set up on the bank. Like I said, today I'm going to concentrate on the long pole shallow at various different depths. On this lake I know that they do catch a little bit deeper than the norm, purely because of the depth of the lake. As I've already said, it's up to 15 foot deep in areas. So shallow doesn't always mean shallow, 3-4 foot deep sometimes. It's a little bit warm today, and the fact that we're almost here on our own probably means that we get a few too many fish in our peg, and it won't be quite the same, but I can still get the gear right and the feeding right. Coupled with that, I've got 2 waggler rods and a bomb rod. I'm going to start just looking at the normal waggler rod. It's my normal setup, same as I'd use at Gold. 8 pound Hyper Sensor mainline, 0.20 hook length and a size 12 QM1. Everything's the same. I've got a lot of friends that fish here a lot, and they say to me it's very similar to Gold Valley. Big carp, catch them at the same depths on the same wagglers. I've got a 6.5 gram waggler there, a Dave Churchwood one, but I have got some of the wagglers that I make myself in case that wind gets up and I just want to be that little bit further out. So like I say, again, strength, durability, reliability, especially when it comes to the Fishermania final. Last thing I want to do is any of my gear letting me down. The gear that I try to use, the rods, the reels, never ever let me down, coupled with strong durable line, and you shouldn't have a problem. 2.5 foot hook length, a little swivel, just a bulk standard pellet waggler rig. I can go a little bit deeper if I want. As far as the bomb rod's concerned, again, very simple setup. Everything's got to be completely free running here, the same as at Gold Valley. The only little difference here at Hayfield, you're not allowed the Guru XA system, so instead of using the elasticated bomb, I've just got a totally free running rig. 10 pound ST mainline, 10 foot air bomb rod. Come the day I will set a duplicate up of each, but today we're here practicing, trying to work out exactly what's happening and going from there. Foot long hook length, 0.22 and a size 12 QM1 again. my basic setup. Just because I'm on a different venue, I'm not going to start changing to what the locals use as far as tackle's concerned. I will change as far as tactics, depths, floats maybe, but as far as my general setup that's never ever let me down, I'm not going to be changing. One little twist that I have got here, you might have heard that I mentioned yesterday that I missed a few bites, foul hooked a few fish, and what I've done is, because of the depth here, they tend to catch a lot of fish just hanging the pellet there at 5 or 6 foot. I think it's a little bit warm at the moment, but I did make a couple of 13-foot rods up, 6 pound high percents of mainline before I came. But what I've done today is I've put a slightly smaller pellet waggler on there, a 4 gram Dave Churchwood again. Same setup, but just slightly lighter line, slightly longer rod, so I can use a slightly smaller float. And the idea is, if those Carasio come in my peg, I've got a slightly more refined setup to try and catch them on. Also, if I want to go on like a Drennan Crystal Waggler, I can go 5 and 6 foot deep, cast it out there and hang it there. And that's something that over the next few days, I'm definitely going to give it a go. So that's the rod setups. As far as feeding on that's concerned, it's just going to be 8mm pellets. I want to talk a little bit about the pole. As I've already said, it's not necessarily fishing shallow, like on a lot of fisheries I go on, Gold Valley in particular, you catch it a foot deep, 10 inches. I think you will catch a few here today, but they do tend to catch a little bit deeper. You can see this rig here, I've got set at 4 foot, not spread the shot out yet. And basically, you're fishing for carp that little bit deeper than you would on a lot of commercials. So 4 foot, I've got one rig, 020 mainline, 017 Drennan fluorocarbon hook length, and a Drennan carp feeder. Again, it's a hook that I've used extensively over the last 20 years. Maybe not so much recently, but it's a hook that I've gone back to. More importantly, Callum's been fishing here a lot, and it's a hook that he's had a lot of success on and hardly lost any fish. When you're fishing this deep shallow, float choice is of utmost importance. And you'll see here, this is a Maver float, again, one that Callum's been using, and he stressed the fact to me that you need a very, very thick top. Not only to see it at 16 metres, but to actually hold that pellet up, especially when your pellet gets a little bit damp, it gets heavy, and you need a thick bristle just to hold it there. Last thing you want to be doing is striking at false bites. That's the 0.4 set at 4 foot deep. Grey hydro elastic, again in the puller. It's an elastic that I absolutely love fishing shallow with for the carp, and it's also soft enough to catch those Carasio. I've got exactly the same float in a 0.3, set at about 3 to 3.5 foot deep. What you'll see, it's difficult to see, but on all my top kits I've got depth marks, 3 foot, up to 4 foot, 2 foot, 1.5 foot. And this enables me to swap and change, and once I find the right depth I can relate to the marker. I've also got a measuring tape in my bag just in case I need it, just to make sure. But it's very crucial depths when you're practicing. Take note of the depth that seems best, take note of the depth where you're getting the most bites, you're not foul hooking fish, and go from there. So they're the two so-called deep shallow rigs. What I have got up as well, again, is my bulk standard shallow rig for fishing just over a foot deep. 12-inch hook length, clear Drennan dibber. All of the main lines are strong and durable. The new Darwa tournament rig line, absolutely fantastic. The shot goes on it well, the float moves perfectly on it, it doesn't mark the line. 020 mainline, 017 hook length, size 16 hook again, and all of those have got bands on for fishing 6mm pellets. We're going to go on to the bait now, and Hayfields again is a little bit different to a lot of commercials I fish, whereas pellets are really the only bait. I've got some casters, I've got some maggots, I've got some ground bait, but pellets really does seem to be the be all and end all, which in a way makes it simple, but always be on guard with other baits, especially this time of year. Worms, casters and even maggots can play a massive part. I'm not going to be fishing with them today. Today I'm going to be using the 6mm fishery pellets on the pole. You have to buy the fishery pellets here, like a lot of fisheries, just looking after their fish. Always respect that and use the fishery pellets. I've got the 8mm as well in the same batch, And what I'm looking for in the pellets, luckily here they sell a mixture of pellets. There's 2 or 3 different types, and the Coppins ones are definitely my favourite. So like I say, as far as the bait's concerned, it's very, very simple. We're going to see what happens today. Callum the other day did catch well on casters and actually won his section in a big match here last Sunday. So it's something that I've got. If it's not going to plan, then tomorrow that might well be something that I try. As far as what I'm going to try and get out of today's session is obviously just fine tune, a little bit of waggler, catch a few fish on everything. That's what I want to do. The fishing may not be fantastic today, I don't know. It's a little bit hot, but we have got a bit of wind on the water, which I think is going to help. It's not about filling your net, always remember that. It's about, you know, coming out of it, understanding a little bit more, a few little things, depths, fine-tuning your feeding. This is a very important thing, and the one thing that I think could be very important on this final is keeping bait going in on your 2 lines. Forget method feeder today and forget the margins and the top 5. We're talking long pole, shallow, waggler and bomb line. And what I want to be very adept at is feeding both lines. Feeding the waggler and bomb line when I'm on the pole, feeding the pole line when I'm on the waggler or the bomb. And that's what I'm going to look at getting used to today. My catapult choice for today, again, this is something that's very important. What I don't want is 2 or 3 different catapults on my bait tray. One for the waggler, one for the pole, one for this, one for that. And what I plump for is the new Drennan waggler catapult. It's got nice heavy elastic, very easy to use. As you can see, it's tangle free. You're going to pick it up, you're not going to have wrap rounds in the elastic and things like that. It's nice and tangle free. But it's also powerful enough to feed my waggler line, but soft enough for me to feed the pole line. And this is what I've been looking for in a catapult. Very, very important. Come the day, I'm going to have 1 catapult. I'll have a few spares of the same one just in case of any breakages. But I can feed my pole line and my bomb and waggler line with the same catapult. Vitally important. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to getting used to and getting fine-tuned and getting fast and efficient. That's what I want to be come the final. It's not about sitting here sacking up, catching loads of fish to me. It's about getting like a well-oiled machine and a few little tricks and that under your hat. Callum's sat on my right and he's going to be fishing a method feeder out to the island, so we can have a little chat with him later. See if he catches a few fish on that. I'm sure he will. It's quite a long chuck where he is, but he's pretty good at casting long distance, so I'm sure if there's any fish out there, we'll see a few fish caught on that. Just a few little things to mention before we actually get fishing. Here at Hayfield, you're not allowed to use keep nets, and you'll see that I haven't even asked for permission. Don't want any preferential treatment. It's the same for everyone. Also, like I've said, it's not about catching a weight of fish for me today. It's purely about trying to find out little things that are going to work for me in the match. So no keep nets, always abide by the fishery rules. Like I say, it's a fantastic fishery with an amazing stock of fish. Some of them are all various different colours. Hopefully you see a few kois and the quality also of the Carasio today. Like I've said, going on, I'm going to start the session probably on the long pole. Now, one thing to look at, like I've always said, is the weather. The wind and the temperature, most importantly. Obviously high pressures, low pressures do play a point, but the 2 things I look at are temperature and wind speed and direction. I can see a big carp just here. If I wanted to today, I'm sure you could dob quite a few fish. Looking forward to next week, it's going to go down to 18 degrees with quite a brisk northerly wind. Don't expect to be dobbing. If I do have to dob, or I'm lucky enough to be on enough fish to dob a few, I've got all the rigs, it's something I've done enough. Don't want to waste time here today doing something that I'm probably not going to be doing in the final, or something that I know I'm very adept at doing. So even though you might see a few fish swimming around, dobbable, so to speak, it's something that I'm not interested in doing today. I want to be fishing the tactics that I think are going to be working in the match. So like I say, you've seen the bait, you've seen the tackle. I think it's time to start feeding a little bit of bait, try and get a few fish interested. I'm actually going to start on the shallow rig, the foot one, just turning it over, pinging a few 6mm on the pole, and also pinging a few 8mm on that waggler. And just swap and change, and just be mindful of the fact, I know I repeat myself a lot, but practice in a way where you're going to learn. Don't practice in a way to beat everyone else on the lake and to impress people and that. Practice in a way where you're going to learn. If you see something you're not sure about, someone else is doing, put your gear down and go and have a look. If Callum's catching a few fish, I'll put my gear down and I'll go and have a chat with him for 10 minutes. Trying to glean information and learn every possible thing that I can is of utmost importance to me. Having fished big matches in the past, World, European Championships, Fishermania finals, I know that sometimes it's the smallest detail that can make the biggest difference. And that's why we're here. Anyway, that's enough of the tactics, the tackle and the bait. I think it's time to start fishing and see if we can catch a few. Yeah, it's all right, didn't they? I started shallow and lost a fowlet carp and caught a big Carasio. I'm just having a go on that 3.5 foot one. I caught a little carp straight away. Well, there we go. Not the biggest carp in the lake, but I only had one fish fishing just over a foot deep. Did foul look a carp as well, but I just gone to about 3.5 foot, missed a few bites and caught that small carp. But I'm really trying to work There's definitely some fish out on the Wagler line, but like we've already touched on, it's not about filling your net today, it's about just getting used to the fishing. I haven't done a lot of this sort of deep shallow fishing, so it's something that I definitely want to try and catch a few fish on. Immediately I can see the advantage of using these floats that Callum's put me onto with a nice thick top, not just because they're easy to see, but they do hold that bait up nice. It's very, very similar to just fishing on the bottom, but you're not. You're just lifting and dropping at little bites. You're not really turning your rig over because it's not a necessity to make as much noise, because obviously you're fishing that little bit deeper. Another little indication then. There's definitely a few fish on that pole line, but I hardly had any indications fishing really shallow. But you can always change back if you do have a swirl or foul hook a few fish. You can always go back shallow. We've always got that rig at the ready. But it's a case of just trying to keep a few lines going and just catch a few fish on the things that you think are important. Making sure along the way that everything's strong enough, everything's reliable enough. When I go to these different venues, I always tend to start with the same setup that I know is strong, reliable and proven. Very similar setup to what I'd be using at Gold or Commercials in the south of England. And it really is a nice way of you know, you can always alter it. There's a fish on there now. Again at that depth. Feels like a slightly bigger fish if it's not foul hooked. But always start off with the gear, fish to your strengths and start with the gear that you know is proven, strong, reliable. It's so important. It's something that, you know, I've tried fishing light. For F1s in the winter, then yeah, fishing light can be a massive bonus. But when you're in these big matches and you're fishing for big fish, you don't want your gear to be letting you down, and I'd always rather fish heavier rather than lighter. Again, I'm trying to get in the groove of feeding all the time. Callum's got one on the method. Really is good to come and practice 2-3 people together. Find out so much more so quick. Does feel like a decent fish, this. I'm really mindful of the fact that I want to be feeding all the time. I think that's going to be absolutely massive in this final. Every time my pellets land on that Wagler line, there's a swirl or a fish moving, which is a brilliant sign. But again, if it was a match, I'd probably already be on it, but it's not. I'm enjoying just getting an odd bite on this deep shallow. Get that one, Cal. Cal's already had a decent carp on that method. He's not been doing it long, so it's really good to see. This feels like a decent carp. And that's one thing as well, not just here, but you've got to get, this time of year, you've got to be able to feed whilst playing fish. Vitally important. The most important thing is that you don't lose the fish because you're feeding, but it's vitally important to be able to feed whilst playing a fish. One thing I've noticed here, just through fishing yesterday, the quality of the fish are outstanding. They fight like mad. People were saying to me before I come, oh, they don't really fight that strong here, and I think if anything it's the opposite. I know they've got the aerators on, which quite often pumps them up a bit, but there you go, nice ghosty. Again, looking to feed all the time. When you bear in mind, you know, £100, £120 could potentially win this match. It's a few fish this size that are going to get you up and close to that. Vitally important to find out ways of catching these bigger fish in the lake, these carp. Yeah, you know, you can catch a Carasio every chuck or some skimmers and you're going to catch a weight, but you're going to need some of these bigger fish. There we go. That just goes to show the sort of quality that you're dealing with when you come to a place like this. Not just in the fight, but look at that for a fish. That should be in someone's garden pond and be their pet. Absolutely awesome. Beautiful fish, still full of fight. What a fish to catch. When we're talking about practicing in different methods, obviously, you know, you want to give yourself time, not only to catch a few fish on it, but just to fine tune the way that you're doing it, your feeding, everything. And what I tend to do is just stay on it long enough until I'm happy. A bream there that thinks it's a dolphin. Until you're happy that you're doing it right. So it's not a case of flogging it to absolutely flogging it and staying on it all day, but it's also a case of staying on it long enough so that you're happy and content with the fact that you're doing it right. But like I say, the beauty is, for me, is sitting here with Cal. He's fished a lot of matches here, and you know what I should do, nice bream, little bit of a weight builder. Gonna, you know, like I said, we're really just after the carp, but get a few of them mixed in. That 15-20 pound of Carasio and bream at the end of the match, you never know, it could just make the difference. Just using a banded 6mm. And straight away, just through fishing shallow for probably just under an hour, definitely that little bit deeper seems really good. It's nice and controlled, and exactly the way that Cal explained it to me, it's happening. It's just like, really, for all intents and purposes, like you're fishing on the bottom. You're not really making a lot of noise. Just lifting and dropping when you get an indication. And that carp, probably a good 6 pound, was literally, as the float settled, it just dinked, just lifted, and it was on. The same with that. There's another one there. Before I could even move, the float went, and before I could react, the pole tips down. Cal's got one on the method. Really is solid, this place. Garpy's got one on a waggler. But all the time I'm practicing, trying to get used to feeding constantly, keeping that bait going in, because when it's this warm, the fish are going to be shallow, and once that bait's fallen below a certain level, it's really not going to play a part. Yes, on the waggler it will, because I'm going to be fishing not the biggest carp in the lake again, probably 3 pound. Hook plumb in the top lip. Beautiful fish. But going back to what I was saying about the methods, you know, stick on it long enough just so that you're happy. You know, it's not a case of catching one fish and thinking, yeah, I've got that sorted. It's a case of catching a few, but also be mindful of the fact just to try those different depths, get your floats right. You can always have a play around with different floats, different elastics. All sorts of things can go through your mind. And the one thing I say with practicing, because it's not so important, is if you feel like doing it and something's telling you to do it, then try it. Because, you know, the amount of times I've been fishing and thought, well, I'm just going to try this, and that's ended up the method is frightening, really. All the time keeping that bomb and waggler line fed on a regular basis. More a case of just getting in the groove of feeding it rather than building it up to catch on it. Yes, I want to definitely catch on it when I go on it, but being a practice session, it's not an out and out necessity to go on it and catch one every chuck. It's more a case of getting adequate at feeding whilst holding a 16-metre pole. Very important. At the moment it's going quite well. I'm feeding it nice, achieving the distance as well. That's something that you've got to be mindful of, the fact that, you know, you want to achieve the correct distance for fishing that waggler when you're holding the pole. It's easy to fire pellets that little bit further when you're not holding a pole, but to do it on a consistent basis when you are holding a 16-metre pole is obviously not the easiest thing to do. Absolutely thousands out there on that waggler at the moment. A little bit of wind blowing up from the right, which is making it a little bit more difficult, because obviously you want to have both hands off the pole when you're trying to feed that waggler line especially. But definitely that little bit deeper seems really good. I think if you're here on your own completely, you'd probably catch a few that little bit shallower, but definitely seems the sort of depth to fish at. Well, I've caught probably 6 or 7 carp on the pole, as well as a few nice sized Carasio, but it just seems to have gone a little bit. Bit of disturbance on the bank, a few people around, could have just pushed the fish out. So I'm going to have my first look on a waggler in a minute. I'm really happy with this pole shallow, I'm happy with my feeding. I've lost a couple foul hook, but I think that's just what happens when you're fishing that little bit deeper. But all in all, really happy with the practice session so far. Been a few fish moving out on that waggler line, so I want to give that a go, coupled with the straight lead as well, and just see if we manage to accumulate a few fish out there. But all in all, really happy with it. Floats, everything's working nicely. The elastic, grey hydro, the floats, everything's bang on. So I think it's now a case, don't want to stay on the pole all day. We've been fishing quite a while, and we'll have a good go on that waggler. There's a few carp about. I've just seen one stick its head out on the waggler line then, and hopefully we've been feeding it regular. Hopefully we get a few bites, if not on the waggler then maybe on the bomb. But Callum's caught a few fish on that method feeder, but not set the world alight. It is a long chuck, but he's fished it nice and accurate. But it doesn't seem to be hundreds of fish against the bank there. Seems to be more fish shallow in deep water than anywhere. The guy on my left's had a couple of fish on the waggler, but again not. Which is why I've just stuck on the pole, because I was getting odd bites, catching odd carp. A couple of them have been quite nice fish, 6-7 pound. Just keep feeding that waggler line. Try and tap in. I've not really caught any tapping. It's just been literally just hanging it there, loose feeding. But really happy with my feeding. Managing to feed that bomb stroke waggler line quite accurately and very regularly, more importantly. There you go, there's another fish there. Like I say, I have foul hooked a couple, but I've had a couple of bream as well. It's a nice big Carasio, and like I say, 7 or 8 carp, so really happy. But if I get this one in, it'll be my last fish on the pole for a little while. But that's the beauty with practicing. You know, you can go out on a waggler, catch a few fish, go and have a chat with Callum, have a little walk around the lake. Just really using your time to better yourself on the venue, to get to know the venue. Trying your elastics, your hooks, your floats, making sure that everything is dead right. And I've got to admit, so far everything Callum's told me with the floats, the line, the feeding, everything seems bang on. Such an advantage when you got, you know, a friend that fishes a venue that you're going to. And it's probably a good time to, you know, to sort of talk about the importance of knowledge, you know, local knowledge. You can go on the internet now, you can get a lot of information, various different sites and that. Really is a mind, you know, it's just full of information if you want it out there. Just little things like the correct floats, the correct hooks, the correct elastic, just to get you started on the right foot. Makes a massive difference, it really does. Bit of a ghosty again. Fighting so hard at the moment. Just being mindful again of the fact that even when I go on the waggler or the bomb, I still want to keep that pole line fed, because in the match, unless it's really windy or something out the ordinary happens, I'm not going to not feed it. So in practice, it's more about getting used to feeding it even when you're not fishing it. Vitally important that you don't let it lapse at all. You get used to fishing a waggler, feeding a pole, fishing a bomb, feeding a pole, fishing a pole, feeding waggler and bomb. Vitally important. They really are fighting. Must be something to do with the aerator, because they're full of life. Beautiful fish. Again, another one that probably should be in someone's garden pond instead of in a fishing lake. Beautiful colours on the fish. Fantastic. I think I'm going to have a little bit of a drinks break, keep those lines fed, and then have a good go on the waggler and the bomb. Fight hard in that other lake in Allcow. one pulled the rod and fought like mad. Two things they don't do. Well, been on the Waggler, caught a few fish. It's been quite good, to be honest, but it is noticeable when that wind drops that the bites seem to tail off. But there's definitely a few fish out there. I've probably caught 7 or 8 carp, nice sized fish as well, a couple of Carasio, and getting indications and that, signs of fish virtually all the time. And although we've been feeding it constantly for quite a while, you know, there's no one really feeding a Waggler line to my right, which is obviously going to make it better, but it's still about building your confidence and just trying to catch a few fish, making sure your gear's right. Seeing when the bites come as well on a Waggler is important. It comes on the splash or after you've moved the Waggler. A lot of these fish are coming as the float lands within 7 or 8 seconds of the float landing. The bigger fish. If I get an indication after that, there's one there, again bang on cue, literally seconds after it's gone in. Seems to be, if you get a bite after that, seems to be a Carasio, or you actually lose the fish, or not lose the fish but miss the bite. But I'd say 100% of the bites you get within 10 seconds of your float landing a proper carp. So really happy. Gonna have a little look on the bomb in a minute just to see. Again, when you're happy on the method and your gear and everything, there's no need to thrash it to a foam, but noticeably more and bigger fish at distance, which there we go. Another fish there now, coming thick and fast on this Waggler. Although virtually pleasure fishing, cows fishing a method to the island, there's still plenty out there, and one of the game plans in the match might be to go a little bit further than other people. It's a proper one that Cal's got there on the method. Well, there we go, reached the end of the session. Might have a little fish on in a minute. Callum's packed up. He's caught quite well on the method, but it was noticeable when he went to the right of the island, where it's obviously a little bit deeper, he caught more. And it goes hand in hand with what a lot of people have said, that the fish aren't really around the islands. But with the temperature dropping, or supposed to be dropping next week, I'm definitely not going to rule it out, and I'm going to spend one of the days this week just fishing a method feeder, just to get in the swing of it. Today's session, to be honest, I couldn't have asked for a better practice session. Caught a few to begin with on the pole. One big Carasio fishing a foot deep, couldn't catch, went deeper, about 3.5 foot. Caught 6 or 7 carp and a few Carasio, and then it just went. I think it was time of day the fish moved out. Went out on a waggler, caught quite well. And again, what was noticeable, a slightly bigger waggler, one of the ones I make myself, 9 grams, was definitely better. If I could cast and keep a straight line, virtually everyone would just pull the rod. Found that when I was striking at bites, I was foul looking fish, missing bites, and it just wasn't right. Sometimes, as when you're fishing shallow on the pole, you're better off waiting for one to hook you rather than you to hook one. That way you end up just picking the rod up and striking when there's a fish on. Really, really interesting. Then obviously went on to fishing the bomb, and there's not a lot I can say about the bomb. Every time it hit the bottom it virtually went round. It didn't do it for long, probably only 50 minutes. Probably caught about 10 on it. It was unbelievable. But you've also got to have that air of, look, you know, I'm sat here on my own. I know Callum's there, but he's not loose feeding pellets. You've got it all to yourself. But I've got a few things out of today, which is exactly what I wanted to do. I know what floats. I know I can use 8-pound mainline and still achieve the distance. One thing I'm really happy with that I thought I did quite well today was actually loose feeding that bomb and waggler line whilst fishing a 16-metre pole, and I managed to still catch fish. It's okay sitting there holding the pole, but you've got to be fishing as well while you're feeding. And you know, it's not easy to do. It's something that I need to practice and get better at, and I think today I've gone a little way towards that. As far as the edge fishing and all that's concerned, I'm just not convinced. I've had a real good chat with Callum again today, and with 2 pegs miss one, 2 pegs miss one, and quite warm temperatures forecast, you know, unless you've got a bit of a gap or a wind hacking in, I'm not convinced you're going to catch, and I'm definitely not convinced that it's going to play a part in the winner's catch. I'm still convinced it's going to be long pole shallow, bomb waggler or method, or maybe a combination of all 4 come the day. Put it together in the right way, draw a good peg. But the good thing is now, no rush to pack up. I'm staying about 10 miles away. Going to have a little walk around the lake with Callum, because Callum knows the lake really well, where to cast and what pegs, etc. It's just finding my feet and feeling at home. But I think today has gone some way to really underlining a few things for me. And to be fair, I'm more than happy. Obviously appreciate it's going to be a little bit peggy, but there's tons of fish in this lake. It really is an unbelievable place. It's manicured like someone's back garden. The fish are gorgeous, they fight like mad. You couldn't ask for more. Are there going to be some hard areas in the final? For sure. Are there going to be some areas that you can't win from? For sure. But the one thing I do know is there's a lot of big fish in here, and if you can get near them and do it right, I think you're going to take some stopping. I've enjoyed today. A little bit different today. We've got no fish for a catch picture. Probably a good job, because I think I'd struggle to lift the net out today. But all in all, it's been fantastic. Thanks to Hayfield for their accommodation and just making me feel welcome. The hospitality here is always second to none. A fantastic place. I've really enjoyed it. Let's hope I just enjoy it a week Saturday.